account in the book of Judges, chapter 11. Let's go there. I'm going to start at verse 1, but then we'll skip down a ways. Judges 11, chapter 1. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead, his mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. "You're not going to get any inheritance in our family," they said, "because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him and followed him. So then as you read, excuse me one moment, as you continue to read in the chapter, it tells how the Ammonites made war against Israel, and the Israelites asked Jephthah to be their leader, and he agreed. And then he contacted the king of the Ammonites to try to make peace, but that wasn't going to happen. So let's take up our reading at verse 29, same chapter. And go down all the way to the end of the chapter, verse 29. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. He crossed Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." What was going through that man's head? Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel-Keramim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of tambourines. She was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. And when he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh, my daughter, you have made me miserable and wretched, because I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." "My father," she replied, "you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised, now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request," she said. "Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry." "You may go," he said, and he let her go for 2 months. She and the girls went into the hills and wept because she would never marry. After the 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she was a virgin. From this comes the Israelite custom that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. Could there possibly be a more striking example of why it's unwise to just blurt out whatever pops into your head? Can you think of any other time that a careless prayer went so stupendously wrong? No doubt you're thinking that Jephthah could have just disregarded his vow. But a man didn't do that in those days. But however he made that vow, it was binding. In fact, the Mosaic Law taught in Numbers chapter 30, verse 2, if a man makes a vow to the Lord, or swears an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word. He must do everything he has promised. And then in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 4 through 6, when you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it, because he takes no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. And do not protest before the temple messenger that your vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry with your words and destroy the work of your hands? Do not let your mouth lead you into sin. Why should God be angry with your words and destroy the work of your hands? I found 4 different ways that our mouth can cause us to sin and stir up God's displeasure. And I don't mean when you're obviously trying to deceive somebody. I'm talking about ways that we do, that we sin and not realize that that's what we're actually doing. So these are careless vows or oaths, empty curses, thoughtless exclamations, and foolish babblings. And today we're only going to cover 2 of them. I thought I'd get all 4 of them into one sermon, but boy, there's a lot of stuff. And I didn't want to keep you here forever. The story of Jephthah is a really difficult one, as you can imagine. And Bible scholars have always struggled with it. Surely, if he had not followed through on this vow, everyone, even the Lord, would have understood. Or perhaps he could have redeemed his daughter, like the firstborn son was redeemed with an animal sacrifice. But then Psalm 15 asks, Lord, who can dwell in your tent? Who can live on your mountain? The one who keeps his word, whatever the cost. It certainly cost Jephthah a lot to keep his word to the Lord, but had he not spoken carelessly and boastfully, he would never have had to pay such a high price. Another father also made a rash oath, and it almost cost him his firstborn son. Saul was leading the Israelites in battle against the Philistines when this happened. And this one is in 1 Samuel chapter 14, verses 24 through 30. Now the men of Israel were in distress that day because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, Cursed be any man who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies. So none of the troops tasted any food. The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. And when they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth because they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that Jonathan being Saul's son, had not heard that his father had bound the people with the oath, so he reached out the end of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers told him, Your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, Cursed be any man who eats food today. That is why the men are faint. And Jonathan said, My father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of this honey? How much better it would have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies. Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater? So the men were tired out, of course, from not having nourishment, yet Jonathan just ate a little bit of honey, and another verse version says his strength was renewed. And so, I do not know why a king would want to starve his troops. But aside from that, keep in mind that Saul was not always mentally stable, and often a tormenting spirit from God troubled him. In this situation, God gave the Israelites victory after victory, so it's really not clear why Saul felt he had to make such a rash oath, but he did. Later that day, God once again caused the Israelites to be victorious. But by this time, the Israelite troops were so hungry that they rushed to plunder the Philistines' provisions and ended up slaughtering the livestock and eating it before the blood was drained out, which was a major, major offense against the law. Well, the next time Saul inquired of the Lord about his battle plans, the Lord did not answer. So Saul knew that there was sin in the camp. They used the Urim and the Thummim. The Urim and the Thummim were a device, scholars think maybe like a set of dice. And they would use these to get answers from God. So they used the Urim and the Thummim to find out what went wrong. Why wasn't God answering Saul's prayer? And in verse 38, Saul said, "All you leaders of the troops, come here. Let us investigate how this sin has occurred today. Here's some more rashness. As surely as the Lord lives who saves Israel, even if it is because of my son Jonathan, he must die." Then later in verse 43, "Tell me what you have done," Saul commanded him. So Jonathan told him, "I only tasted a little honey with the end of my staff that was in my hand, and now I must die?" And Saul declared, "May God punish me, and ever so severely, if you, Jonathan, do not surely die." Saul had made a rash statement earlier, now he felt bound to follow through with it. But the people said to Saul, "Must Jonathan die, he who accomplished such a great deliverance for Israel?" Jonathan was a really brave warrior, and he had done he had won a lot of battles for Israel, and now he's going to die? Well, the people said, "Never. As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for with God's help he has accomplished this today." So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. Then Saul gave up his pursuit of the Philistines, and the Philistines returned to their own land. Saul started out by making one rash and prideful oath, and from there it escalated. This was a man who made excuses for his own disobedience, but he was going to make sure that someone paid dearly for an accidental transgression, even if it meant that his own son, who was the crown prince and a fearless warrior, even if it meant that his own son had to die. Now, oaths are necessary in certain situations because we live in a sinful world. In court, raising your right hand and swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth can actually be a positive thing because it causes the witness to think very carefully about their testimony. They are not to go beyond the truth, which we sometimes do when we're emotional, nor are they to withhold any part of the truth that is relevant. When a couple decide to get married, they share vows of commitment and fidelity in front of their family members and friends, to declare to the world their desire to begin a new life together as one in the eyes of God and man. Leading a couple through their marriage vows is a tremendous and solemn experience and a great privilege. Compare those two examples with the celebrities who swore they would leave the country if George W. Bush won the presidency back in 2000. They never left.
Amen.
And a couple years ago, many more vowed to exile themselves if Donald Trump became president, and they're still here.
Amen.
Which causes me to believe that if they make such a bold public statement and then refuse to follow through, like they think everyone forgot about it, then they are insincere fakers and liars, and you can't believe anything they say. In like manner, when we make a statement in the form of an oath, and then we don't follow through, we are also lying. And you may think that you don't ever make empty vows or oaths, but I think possibly if you examine your own speech, you'll probably find out that you do. I know that I occasionally make empty oaths, and now I try hard not to do that. I used to do it in the past. I try not to do it anymore. I feel that if I make a statement that I don't intend to follow through on, and I know sometimes things happen and we can't, but when we can and we don't, then it makes us a liar. And God will be angry with our words. Now, it's common for new Christians to bargain with God by swearing to do something if He will answer their prayer, but then they don't keep their word. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12. You must not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Many times people will use the Lord's name to make an empty vow. God calls it abuse of His name. And here's what Jesus had to say about it in Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said to the ancients, do not break your oaths, but fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I tell you not to swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is His footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor should you swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything more comes from the evil one. Curses are also a way that God may be angry with our words. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 9. Anyone who curses his parents is to be put to death. To curse means to treat with contempt, to despise, to dishonor, to treat as insignificant. So if you can imagine someone with a pattern of abusive, insolent, disdainful behavior toward their parents, not giving them proper honor, the law required that they be put to death. Please keep in mind that this would not be done lightly. No sane parent actually wants their son to be executed. They would do everything possible and overlook many, many faults, giving their son time to grow out of his bad behavior before they finally took him to the city gates and said, here's my son, I can't do anything with him, he's abusive, he hits us, etc. There are those teenage and adult children who are not only verbally but physically abusive toward their parents. Such behavior not only goes against the divine order, but it dishonors God, who created the divine order of the family and placed that child under the authority of their parents. To curse your parents is to curse God. No wonder it's such a serious offense. And I'm going to stop there, but next week we'll continue on this topic. So let's pray. Father, we thank you for the instruction that is in your word. We thank you that it reveals to us your heart your thoughts, that which is important to you. It shows us how to live in a way that is pleasing to you. Father, I pray that we would not be fearful of examining our words, that we would learn to be very careful about what comes out of our mouth. I believe it's in James, it says that the power of life and death is in the tongue. We want to speak life, O Lord. We want to be like Jesus in how we speak. And I just pray that you would help us to know the difference between what is acceptable to you and what is not. What words make you angry and which ones are pleasing to you. Oh Lord, instruct us by your Holy Spirit, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.